I want to go through this because this is one of my biggest, I wouldn't call it a fear in Bitcoin, but it kind of is. And it's a fear that not a whole lot of people are talking about. And a lot more people should be talking about this. So I'll give you a bit of a background to this. Yesterday, I was doing an interview with a guy, and it was a guy in Germany, actually. And it was funny because when I was talking to him, I said, "Are you going to have Gigi on?" Because it was an interview because he was doing a master's thesis on Bitcoin. And I said, "Are you going to have Gigi on?" Because as soon as I heard this guy talk, I was like, "Is this Gigi?" Gigi's also from Germany, I believe, but they sounded almost identical. And anyways, we're talking about this, and he's asking me about these different price prediction models and things. And he was talking about threats to like regulatory threats, competitive threats to Bitcoin. And I said one of my biggest fears in Bitcoin was actually the paper Bitcoin. And I just don't think that there's nearly enough. And the other question he had was like, what's it gonna take for us to see a hyperbolic move upwards? And I said, it's probably gonna happen. It's not gonna be like one day or 1 week where it just goes. It probably will, but not like a hyperbolic. And again, I don't have a crystal ball. It might happen. I just think that that'll never happen until we see proof of reserves. Until we see proof of reserves. And what's happening right now in Bitcoin is that there's a lot of paper Bitcoin, and people use the word manipulation. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but like one of the biggest value propositions of Bitcoin is the fixed supply of it. And so now we have all these different markets trading on Bitcoin. But the problem is they're not actually sending Bitcoin on chain. It's just paper Bitcoin. And so from an asset with 21 million hard cap or 2.1 quadrillion sats to now all of a sudden have all these different options and futures and ETFs and all this other bullshit. Plus, you have very big corporations who refuse to show proof of reserves. And I'm not going to name any names, but you know exactly who I'm talking about here. One's a big exchange, and one's a pretty big corporation that buys Bitcoin. And I have no doubt that it'll happen because they're going to be forced to do it. Because at some point, people are going to say, okay, this is getting kind of crazy here. None of this makes sense. We have all this demand flowing into Bitcoin. The supply is not going up. It's like, I think the spread is like 6,000 Bitcoin being purchased every day, and there's only 450 Bitcoin being mined every day. So that's just like that spread alone. So 6,000 units demand, 450 supply units. That's a big variance. It's not like it's 500 to 450 or even 1,000 to 450. There's a big variance right now between the demand in Bitcoin and the supply. And I really think that if these markets, like the options market, the futures market, the hell was that? The ETFs, if these didn't exist, I'm quite convinced that Bitcoin would be in the millions and beyond. But what's happening right now is they're able to essentially create more Bitcoin on top of these things, paper Bitcoin. And I don't know how it ends. I think that proof of reserves eventually will become the norm and kind of all this will get flushed out. This can't continue forever. I hope it can't anyways. And again, I'm not going to call this my biggest fear, but it's my biggest beef in Bitcoin right now is just how much paper Bitcoin is being created without anybody really even caring about it. And even if you think about it, a big exchange, right? Because when somebody goes to buy Bitcoin, like let's say you wanted to buy Bitcoin from Coinbase, you send them $1,000 in fiat. They happily accept your $1,000. They might keep it in their bank account. They might lend it out to somebody else. They might buy a little bit of Bitcoin. Who knows? But the transaction there is that they took $1,000 from you. That's what happened there. And then you look at your phone and you say, oh, I have $1,000 worth of Bitcoin. Right on. Oh, it's down today. Oh, it's up today. But they just took your $1,000. That's all that happened there. And so exchanges, the big ones, are just a giant slush fund of taking a bunch of people's cash and hopefully buying some Bitcoin. But I would bet that it's not one-to-one. Unless you look at somebody like River, and River actually is the gold standard in this situation, I would say. And if you're in the US and you're not using River, I think that you're actually doing, kind of crazy to say, But I really think that you're doing Bitcoin a disservice because there's no other exchange right now that's showing proof of reserves. And you can go look at this yourself. This is on River's website. So again, these liabilities here, this is what they owe their customers. 24,525 Bitcoin worth. Right? Does that make sense? These liabilities here are when you send River $1,000 and they're holding on to it for you. That's a liability to them because they owe you that amount in Bitcoin. And River, to my knowledge, is the only exchange that's actually doing this properly. And they're the only one who's legitimizing Bitcoin. Everybody else is just building paper Bitcoin on top of Bitcoin. And so you can see here their assets. That means that they hold 24,710 Bitcoin themselves. So they have 24,710 Bitcoin, which they show proof of reserves for. They audit it every month. They just did it yesterday or 2 days ago. And they owe customers 24,000, which means that if every single client at River went to pull out their Bitcoin, they could facilitate that. I guarantee that would not be the case with any other exchange. I shouldn't say guarantee, but to my best knowledge, that's not the case. And I don't even know what the spread would be there. Like if you think about a bank, the bank's reserves, like what they have actually cash on hand plus their own deposits, what do you think it would compare to the liabilities? The liabilities that they actually owe to their customers if everybody came to the bank on the same day and said, hey, we want to take our cash out of here. Banks are like 1%. That's fractional reserve lending. So banks are, I think the minimum is like, I don't even know what the minimum is, like 1%, which means that for every dollar that they have, they owe $100 to their customers. That's how banks work. That's how banks work. That's how most Bitcoin exchanges work. And so that's why I say if you're not using River, you're doing a disservice to Bitcoin because you're signaling to the world that you don't give a shit. Nobody else shows proof of reserves. And I mean, then if you look at exchanges like Bitcoin Well and Bull Bitcoin, they actually don't hold anybody's Bitcoin for them. So it's impossible for them to have this. They would be 0% or they would be 100% because they actually don't keep any customers' Bitcoin. So whatever assets they have, they would have zero liabilities here to their customers because Bitcoin Well will not take my cash and hold on to it. They take my cash, they buy Bitcoin, they send it to me. So I should have rephrased that. Unless you're using an exchange that's non-custodial or you're using River, I think that you're doing a disservice to Bitcoin because we have, the only way that this is going to change is if people take action. That's the only way it changes. I can sit here and bitch about it all I want to, but that's not going to change anything. And so what my theory is here is that I think that proof of reserves have to become the standard if we ever want to see a fair Bitcoin price remotely close to what it should be. Because all these different things, and this is the post that I wanted to share here from Control Plane Capital. So it's actually based on a tweet from Bob Kendall on Twitter. But the TLDR is Bitcoin price discovery shifted from on-chain supply to a synthetic float. Financial derivatives created a theoretically infinite supply of Bitcoin. That's a fucking problem. Financial derivatives created a theoretically infinite supply of Bitcoin. What's the biggest? Well, I shouldn't say the biggest, but what's one of the main value propositions of Bitcoin? The fixed supply. The fact that no matter how many people want to buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin, we cannot create more of it. That's why mathematically Bitcoin price in fiat terms will go up forever. The purchasing power of each sat will go up forever because of that. Because as more and more people want to hold Bitcoin as the demand grows, we cannot create more supply to meet that demand. It's the only asset in human history that's ever been the case. And so by allowing these financial derivatives to essentially create a theoretically infinite supply of Bitcoin, that's a big problem. So synthetic manufacturing of supply eliminates scarcity as well. Institutions use paper inventory to manipulate price movements, and Bitcoin now functions as a fractional reserve price system. As a Bitcoiner, that is a big, big, big problem. And again, what am I going to do about it? I can't do anything about it other than talk about it. and encourage people to start talking about it and encourage people to move to companies who are actually doing this the right way, like River, like Bitcoin Well, like Bull Bitcoin. Everything else is just a casino. Everything else is fractional reserve. Everything else adds to the infinite supply of Bitcoin. Huge problem. So what my advice here is if you are using somebody else, I'm not going to force everybody to move to River here. I'm just saying, like, you get to vote. These are the kind of votes that actually matter. You go down to the polls, you write a name of your favorite politician on there. Again, voting is like the adult equivalent of writing a letter to Santa Claus. But these kind of votes actually matter. You're saying that I want to support River because they're actually doing things the right way. They're showing proof of reserves. They have the equal amount of assets to their liabilities. They have an equal amount of Bitcoin to the Bitcoin that they owe their customers. If every customer at River went to say, hey, we want our Bitcoin, they would be able to facilitate that. That's Bitcoin. That's how Bitcoin should be. So I would encourage you to use River, but or Bitcoin Well or Bull Bitcoin, you just take self-custody directly from there. But even if you want to use somebody else, I would say take it off the exchanges that day. And I'm thinking most people here do, but you leaving Bitcoin on exchanges allows for price manipulation. And the thing that kills me about this whole situation, like the financial derivatives here, is that financial advisors, they make their money off of customers. You got X amount of money in a fund, they're taking a percentage off of that because they're managing it for you. That's how they. I'm going to take it easy on financial advisors because there are some good financial advisors out there, but for the most part, they do very well on the backs of their customers. And so they would never, ever encourage their customers to go and buy Bitcoin and hold it in self-custody. So even though some financial advisors are like on board with Bitcoin, they're pushing their clients to like an ETF. Why? Because in that ETF, they don't have any sort of responsibility. They don't have to teach their clients anything. They don't have to do any work, and they can still get their 1% or whatever it is of their client's fund. And the more that happens, the worse things are going to get here. So again, I would encourage you as best you can to take your Bitcoin off the exchanges. That's the easiest thing that we can do. Because if we kind of normalize that, which I think that we have for the most part, that's going to limit their ability to manipulate for the most part. But again, I think that the stronger signal that you can do here is actually switch to River or Bitcoin Well or Bull Bitcoin, an exchange like that. That'd be my best advice here. So I have, I wish that we had something like River here in Canada, because our River is ShakePay, and ShakePay does not provide proof of reserves. And again, I'm not claiming that these exchanges are doing anything funny. We're just allowing them to. We're giving them the possibility and the opportunity to. And again, I don't know if they're manipulating it. I don't know if it's being done on purpose, but I do know that as all these different financial products are created, the supply of Bitcoin grows, and that is a huge problem. And so we just need to do what we can here. We can't stop it ourselves, but we need to make people more aware of it and actually take action in whatever way that we can. So for anybody watching this, I'm going to share the link. I just encourage people to do it. Just give River a shot. Like if you tried and you hate them, then don't do them. Don't do that. But just give them a shot. Take whatever you got, a couple $100 today that you were going to buy in the dip. Just throw that into River today and just see what your experience is like there. See what your experience is like, because again, we do have the ability to vote with our capital. So if you're watching this now, I just threw in the chat. If you're watching this later, if I end up clipping this or something, I'll put the link to River in the pinned comments. I think you get like $100 worth of free Bitcoin. So that helps. You're helping Bitcoin, you're helping yourself. And there you have it. There's a lot of people in this community who already use River and are very happy about that decision. So shout out to River, reverse shout out to everybody else, reverse shout out to everybody who's creating Bitcoin on top of Bitcoin. And basically, manipulating the price. That's what it is. Like it's I can't sugarcoat it. I'm not going to accusing anybody of it, but it's definitely happening and it's a problem in Bitcoin. So everybody thinks that, it's because that the rumors of Epstein being Satoshi, which is the craziest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life, or it's the quantum FUD. But the reality is just that there's no fixed supply of Bitcoin anymore because the institutions are creating Bitcoin on top of Bitcoin. And basically the fixed supply of Bitcoin that we know and love